All right, I'm excited to get started studying with you Paul's letter to the Romans. And this is just going to be an introductory video talking a little bit about what it means for us to be reading Paul's letter to the Romans. Paul's letter to the Romans is one of the works of the New Testament. It is one of the books of Scripture. And in order to understand it, it probably first helps to know a little bit about the person who wrote it. It is a letter from one of the apostles to one of the churches especially, but it's also a letter that seems to have meaning and a lot of significance for all the churches at all times in all places. Romans is the first letter that you come across written by Paul in the New Testament, right after the four Gospels, right after the book of Acts. And Romans is probably first, not because it was the earliest letter he wrote, but because it's kind of Paul's masterpiece that sums up his thinking, sums up his message about God that he preached in all the churches. See all the books in green here? All the books in green are letters that Paul wrote. And Paul, as you can tell, clearly wrote a lot of the New Testament. His thinking is very important, and it's some of the earliest witness we have to what the earliest Christians believed about Jesus and about their life together as the church. You know, I think Cameron Jorgensen had it right when she said, he's kind of like the Hamilton of the New Testament. He's kind of like the founding father that had the most to say. I don't know what you know about Alexander Hamilton, but Alexander Hamilton wrote and wrote and wrote and was really responsible for putting down on paper a lot of the ideas at the foundation of the United States of America. And it's also, I think, an interesting image or analogy to think of Paul as the Hamilton of the New Testament, because you might know that there's a popular musical out called Hamilton, which has taken the sort of old, dusty, crusty image of Alexander Hamilton that many of us learned in high school growing up and has refurbished it, rebooted it, given it a whole new look and flavor. I like to think that by reading carefully and studying Paul's letter to the Romans, we could maybe dust off some of the dustiness, some of the crustiness of what has become our assumptions about earliest Christianity, about the message of the gospel, about Paul, and maybe sort of refurbish, reboot our understanding of what the gospel really is. Because I believe the gospel is not dusty or crusty or just old news, but it really still is the newest thing, the best thing that we have to talk about. It's the greatest story ever told, and it's worth understanding the message. Paul thought that. Paul said about the gospel, I am not ashamed of the gospel, referring to our teaching about Jesus, the church's message about Jesus and about faith, about God. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God. Notice how he says there, not just because it tells us about the power of God or it is the means by which we understand the power of God. No, it is. The gospel is the power of God. That's how important the message is. It's how important preaching the gospel is for Paul. It is the power of God that is able to bring about salvation to everyone who believes. Salvation, not just for Jews, not just for Christians, not just for people raised a certain way. No, to understand Paul's gospel is to understand the meaning and the message of Jesus in a nutshell in such a way that we can also communicate it to others that they may believe. So I'm excited about studying Paul's letter to the Romans with you and coming to understand the gospel that brings salvation that much better.